When I would talk to, say, my parents in Wilmington, Delaware, only 2 hours away, educated people who read the papers and are up on current events, they wouldn't even know what Mr. DeLay was doing. And when they did hear about it, they thought, how can that be? That sounds illegal. And it was that understanding that people outside the Beltway just had no conception of what was going on here. And when they did hear about it and learn about it, they were shocked and wanted it to end. That was really why I thought, wow, it's time for someone else to come in and say, let's see if we can do something about this.
So what was your reaction when he left Congress?
Oh, I was overjoyed. I danced a little jig. It was the best moment. There is nothing we've done at Crew, to my mind, that is as important as helping get rid of Congressman Tom DeLay and having him out of the halls of Congress.
Now, I've seen on your list one of the you have a strong opinion about Tom DeLay for other reasons or the same reasons that she did.
Oh, I think Tom DeLay was a disaster in terms of government ethics, and we were virtually alone on the right in criticizing him early on in the Bush administration. The Bush administration came in, and then we saw information that Tom DeLay's fundraising operation was making it clear to donors that you could come and give money to us, and then you get to talk about tax policy with White House officials. Completely inappropriate and illegal. And we said as much. And some of our erstwhile friends on the right weren't too happy about it. But during the Clinton years, I know the Democrats thought I was crying crocodile tears for them, but I thought Clinton corruption was a terrible thing for the Democratic Party because any ideas they had got sidetracked by that. And electorally, it did not turn out well. They lost the election in 2000, arguably because of Clinton corruption. And but then the Republicans came in saying that they were going to clean things up, not only in Congress generally in 1994, but have a new era. And instead they were doing and really perfected the sort of influence peddling and extortion and the willingness to accept bribes too often that the Clintons had done. And it was ironic. We had complained to the Justice Department about the fundraising activities of Republicans on the Hill. And they wrote back to us a letter that said, as we told Henry Hyde when he had similar complaints about Bill Clinton, we're not going to do anything. And I thought how a worm had turned, that, the one party that had criticized the corruption started to embody it. And sure enough, we were right. And many years later, even folks like Karl Rove admit that a key contributing factor to the downfall of the Republican Party nationally was the perception, appropriate in many respects, that it was corrupt, certainly at the congressional level.
You also went after Vice President Cheney. For what reason?
Well, for a variety of reasons. We saw that they had this energy task force, which as a conservative I thought was generally silly because there was a concern about energy. I guess there's concern about energy every 2 years here in Washington. But in 2001 they had the brownouts in California, so the Bush administration said we have to have an energy task force. And it looked like they were meeting with outsiders in a way that may trigger the open meetings law known as the Federal Advisory Committee Act. And I thought, and my colleagues at Judicial Watch thought, this is just like Hillary. This is like Hillary's healthcare task force, which was similarly criticized for bringing in outside lobbyists. And this Federal Advisory Committee Act is important because if it's only government officials meeting, they have some ability to talk and create policy without as much public scrutiny they would have if they brought in outside individuals to help make policy. And the law is designed to prevent outsiders from coming in and taking on the roles of government officials, but without the attendant accountability. So we had a FOIA lawsuit and a lawsuit under this open meetings law. The FOIA lawsuit resulted in extracting tens of thousands of pages of documents, which critics of the Bush administration used to criticize him in terms of the formulation of energy policy. And we took the open meetings law lawsuit all the way up to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, we didn't win at the Supreme Court, but I think it was a Pyrrhic victory for Dick Cheney because that really set the stage, I think, in terms of the public's perception of Bush secrecy. We also were critical of Cheney over Halliburton. Again, the left loved us for that as well because, Halliburton was getting these no-bid contracts in the run-up to the Iraq War and during the initial phases of the Iraq War. And it looked to us like it may have been inappropriate. And it wasn't just us complaining, it was Halliburton's competitors complaining. And the Bush administration saying, well, Cheney has nothing to do with it, blah, blah, blah. And it turned out documents we uncovered showed that the Halliburton contracting was coordinated in some fashion with Vice President Cheney's office, contrary to public protestations that Cheney and his people were putting out. Cheney is has many admirable leadership qualities, but there became this focus on secrecy that I don't think was terribly conservative. I mean, it's one thing to be concerned about the release of torture memos and how that might impact or other national security information. But the Cheney crowd would say that we can't find out whether or not an interior official is meeting with an oil lobbyist because it would impact on the ability of the president to get advice, and the republic would fall. And they're crying wolf on everything related to openness. Makes you think that maybe you just don't like the idea of being held accountable to the American people generally.
Let's go back and talk some about your own background. Where were you born?
I was born in West Nyack, New York, in Rockland County, New York, which is about 20 miles north of New York City.
Parents alive? And
parents are alive. My father was a supermarket manager. My mother was a homemaker who became a nurse.
Big family?
Big family, huge family, one of 10.
You're one of 10 children?
I'm one of 10.
Where do you fit in the 10?
I'm number 7. I'm number 7 on the scale. We have eight boys and 2 girls in that family, and it's a big raucous family. Parents were active conservatives, my mother especially on the pro-life side of the issue. And I came down to school at George Washington University, and was here during the Bork hearings, and I remember that quite succinctly as my thinking, well, maybe the left isn't really up to snuff in terms of their being responsible and fair in the way they treated Judge Bork. And after that, I started working with Morton Blackwell, who ran an international conservative group called the International Policy Forum that took conservatives abroad to have them meet with fellow conservatives abroad and exchange ideas, and then his Leadership Institute, which helped train conservatives. And then I went on and worked with Accuracy in Media, which is Reed Irvine's group, which you may know. Obviously the anti-media bias, liberal media bias organization. And I was working with Paul Weyrich. I was doing TV with Weyrich's network at the time, the late great Paul Weyrich. So I've worked for all the great ones in that regard. And what I liked about Judicial Watch is that there's an important role for think tanks in this town. But the American people want leadership, they want activism, and we just don't complain about government corruption. We try to do something about it, either through the courts or just generally in terms of educating the public and highlighting the bad actors in our nation's public life.
I asked Melanie Sloan about the funding of Crew, and then I want to come back and ask you the same question. Let's watch what she said about it. Who are some of the biggest donors you have, and is there a restriction on how much money they can give you?
We don't have any restriction, but I would say our biggest donors are, for example, the Open Society Institute is a very big donor.
And whose organization is that?
Well, it's a foundation, but it's well known to be George Soros is the one who funds it. The Wallace Global Fund gives us money. The ARCA Foundation gives us money. Those are some of the big foundations where Carnegie Corporation gives us money.
You do see a thread through the different sides in this where a big donor like George Soros will give to an awful lot of progressive organizations. Does he ever ask for anything directly?
No, and I have met him, and he's never asked for anything at all. And I meet with the program officer from the Open Society Institute, and they're very happy with what we do, and they're very keen on transparency. We're part of their democracy program.
First, what's your reaction to the Open Society Institute and George Soros?
Well, I think it's interesting. George Soros is an advocate for a particular set of values, and I respect Melanie. I think her organization does some good work. What's interesting about Crew is that they were founded, frankly, modeled after Judicial Watch, and folks like Hillary Clinton and George Soros and other leaders of the left wanted to highlight and support an organization to act as a counterweight to our activities. So we're always flattered by Crew's work, and as I said, they do good work. We've worked with them in the past and probably will in the future.
So money, your money.
The bulk of it, the large bulk of it, comes from small donors. We have about 150,000 active donors. Probably 800,000 have given us money over the years, and I can't emphasize how important it is that the role these small contributions play. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without it.